It's now time for the Acrisure Fan Advantage here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We have Stacy Jo Rost from SeattleSports.com here on the show to talk with us. She's going to get you all the insights you need for this big game that's basically a playoff game for both of these teams as they both fight for playoff position in the AFC and the NFC. Steelers-Seahawks talk coming at you here on the North Shore Drive podcast. It's time for the Acrisure Fan Advantage. You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter. Hello and welcome to the Acrisure Fan Advantage here on the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm Chris Carter of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. As always, you can find this show every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, sometimes Saturday, like this episode, where we talk to an opponent expert. And this episode is brought to you by the Acrisure Fan Advantage. The Acrisure Fan Advantage is bringing you closer to the Steelers all season long and better than ever. Every Friday, we answer your burning questions with our Steelers insider, Brian Batko, here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And then the day before the game, we get you an in-depth conversation with an opponent expert each week. This week, it's Stacy Jo Rost. Visit acrisure.com/fan advantage for more information on that. Stacy, thank you so much for taking time to join us here on the podcast. Before we get into the teams, what are the vibes right now in Seattle? Because Pittsburgh just went from everything's over, the world is falling upon us, to Mason Rudolph has saved the world. And I don't know what, because it's the same record in Seattle, and it has to be been a crazy ride.
It's been really weird, and it's also been weird because not only was there a Monday night win and obviously this most recent win, but it was a comeback win by two separate quarterbacks. So in addition to being like, oh my God, we're back in it, which is kind of the vibe that I'm getting from fans, there's also a little bit of like still some questions about, okay, can Geno do this? Can Drew do this? The way I look at it is like, hey, it turns out that you have a pretty solid backup quarterback situation. You can maybe win with either guy, but Geno's clearly the guy moving forward either way. I think there's just a renewed faith in the team. I mean, it will not surprise you, Christopher. I was getting texts into our show being like, just tank. Take pick. I'm sure that you were getting a lot of the same, right? From Steelers fans that were like, I'm done. Fire Tomlin.
Yes, that happens. So that was my next question. Do you guys get fire Pete Carroll chance, or yes, do people want that so bad? Okay, it's the same thing in Pittsburgh right now.
Yeah, I think it's I mean, I'm sure, these two teams are like mirror images of each other in so many ways. And I hadn't been paying super close attention to the Steelers season. And then I learned much more about them this week, a little bit last week. And I was like, oh my God, it's like looking in a mirror with some of these issues. I mean, it almost helps you understand the team better. If you're a Steelers fan watching this, everything that you're frustrated with your team, for the most part, that's been Seattle's experiences. There are some differences, obviously. I'm sure we'll get into it, right? The Steelers' red zone defense is much better. Seattle's passing offense, much more productive. However, those kind of like calls for firings and calls for the end of the season and tension, I think a lot of that comes from both of these organizations have seen great success with these head coaches. What happens when the success is much harder to earn, right? And they have been scratching and clawing their way into playoff spots of late. And I think that there comes some uneasiness. You don't want to call fans spoiled. That's not what it is. But it is this kind of like, maybe if you were a fan of the Houston Texans, getting a wild card would be fantastic right now. You're trying to battle back into the AFC. But for both the Steelers and the Seahawks, they've been there, they've done that, and they want to win Super Bowls.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's something, the Seahawks have been a major contender over the past decade. The Steelers are used to being contenders. Both are kind of at that tail end where the Seahawks just got rid of their franchise quarterback. The Steelers just saw their franchise quarterback retire. And there's all that drama going on with Russell somewhere else right now. But both franchises are looking to find their way through that time. And it's always a battle. But I wanted to ask you about the current quarterback situation. A lot of people in the Pittsburgh area, West Virginia being the obvious connect, have been big fans of Geno Smith from way back to his college days and have really enjoyed his rise with Seattle. What has Geno looked like this year on the whole, fighting through injuries and everything else that he's endured?
There has been some statistical regression. So you're seeing fewer touchdowns. You saw him hit interceptions earlier in the season. Last year, I think he finished with just 11. He hit something like 8 interceptions like a couple weeks ago. You know what I mean? Like it's been a less accurate Geno overall, who led the league in completion percentage last year, set a new franchise record in completion percentage and in yardage. But there are, unsurprisingly, anytime there are quarterback issues, oftentimes there are bigger issues around that, right? It's easy to look at the guy with the ball and go, what's he not doing? And some of this does fall on Geno. But there have also been instances of poor offensive line play. This is an offensive line that didn't have both starting tackles playing together until the Eagles game. Like, they really went a good chunk of the season with, like, at points, like 2 starters. I remember they were playing the Giants, and the entire conversation in this prime time, I think a Monday night game, was, oh God, God bless Danny Dimes playing behind this banged up Giants offensive line. In that game, the Seahawks had like one remaining starter, which was their center, a first-year player with them because he was a free agent. It's just been such bad luck. That's been part of the story. Shane Waldron's still evolving as a play caller, obviously from a great system, a great background with Sean McVay, and really has utilized tight ends in fun and creative ways, but got away from it of late. So there's been some head-scratching play calling decisions as well. All of that has factored into this. So if you're not watching closely, you're just looking at Geno's numbers going, he doesn't worry me anymore. He's back to old Geno, but it's not that simple.
See, that's the thing. Like, I look at the numbers and I'm like, okay, so obviously not, the comeback player of the year level,
Right.
but
Right.
but when I watch the game, I'm like, no, this guy's still locked in. It just hasn't clicked for whatever reason this year. And that the tight end is one of the positions I wanted to talk to you about, because I look at the depth chart for the Seahawks at tight end, and I'm like, that could be a problem for the Steelers. You got Noah Fant, who was a former first-round pick. Colby Parkinson had a touchdown last week. Will Dissly, he's been a problem in the past. And the Steelers, for the first 11 games of the season, they were fine. They only allowed 1 touchdown to tight ends. They were fine. But then when all their safeties got hurt and all their linebackers got hurt, all of a sudden they gave up 5 touchdowns to tight ends in 4 games. That they broke a streak where they had a lot of touchdown to tight ends every game just last week against the Bengals. But now this is a week where if I'm the Seahawks, I'm going right down the middle of this defense and attacking with those guys. Do you think that Geno is in a position with this offense and how it's constructed right now where such a switch could be done where the tight end does become a priority?
I think so. You know what's weird for the tight ends is they haven't been utilized as much as they should be. I think part of that is there's just a lot of love to go around. I mean, yeah, you got this great tight end group. You also have DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. Oh, and you drafted a first-round wide receiver in Jackson Smith-Njigba. Oh, and you got some, pretty solid pass catchers and undrafted, rookie with Jake Bobo. So you've got a lot of places that you can find good pass catching talent. So that has just limited shares for a lot of these players. But when it comes to tight ends, they've been helping out with the offensive line earlier in the season. You saw less from Will Dissly. Colby Parkinson, though, that touchdown to Colby Parkinson against the Titans, I think, is a prime example of like what the offense can look like when they utilize that length and that size from Colby. I mean, I'm watching, this guy's like 8'2", and you're watching going, why are you doing this every single week? Like, he is not a big pass blocking or like run blocking helper. I mean, they've kind of turned to Will Dissly for that. Like, he has great hands. He was a great pass catcher with Stanford, and I hope that we see a little bit more of those moments. He had another great play against the San Francisco 49ers. I'm hoping that rather than just being 1 or 2 flashes in the pan, that this is something that they lean more into.
I want to talk more about the matchup,
by the way, for any Steelers fans.
There you go. Thank you for that heads up.
Yeah.
I want to talk to Stacy more about the matchups here. We'll do that here in just a minute here on the North Shore Drive podcast, the Acrisure Fan Advantage. Reminder, all season long, we've been giving you the Acrisure Fan Advantage. We'll keep doing that as long as the Steelers are still alive this week, next week, and if they have a playoff game, the weeks after that, we'll be going into that. And remember, you can go to acrisure.com/fan advantage for more information to submit your questions to get them answered on the Friday edition of the show that we do with Brian Batko. We're also brought to you by Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar in all of Pittsburgh. If you're going to the North Shore, it's right across the street from PNC Park. You go on Federal Street. They have over 500 different available beers. 300 of those beers are local. 80 of those local beers available on tap. Over 20 televisions. You can even reserve TVs with the tables that you're reserving to make sure that you're watching whatever bowl game, NBA game, NHL game, NFL game, whatever you want. They're going to help you watch it there, and you're going to have the best experience. Also, order their steak on a stone meal, where you get your choice cut of steak brought to you on a heated stone, and every piece you cut off, you press into the stone. You choose how well done you want every single bite of steak. Go to the best bar in Pittsburgh. That's Mike's Beer Bar in the North Shore. And when you get there, tell them Chris sent you. We're back here on the North Shore Drive podcast. It's the Acrisure Fan Advantage here from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm Chris Carter, Stacy Jo Rost of SeattleSports.com. Stacy, let's get to a big talking point right here. Now, full disclosure, we're recording this Friday afternoon, 4 p.m. Eastern time, 1 p.m. Pacific time. So we are not going to be privy to all of the Seahawks availability and the information that's going to be privy to people on Saturday. But as it stands going into Friday, Kenneth Walker, a big piece here for the Seahawks, hadn't practiced on Wednesday or Thursday. Stacy, is there any anticipation that he could get his shoulder healed up and ready for this game?
I mean, I would hope so. So he has been dealing with a shoulder injury. It's caused him to miss a little bit of time. It's been hampering him. So it's not a new injury, although we've seen him. I'm pulling up the injury report now. We've seen him obviously practice through that and play through that. So I am hoping that this is more maintenance. I will say our station has a sister station, right? We're a radio cluster, and Pete Carroll does an exclusive hit with our sister station. Because it's a news station, they don't go too into the weeds with injuries. So it's just kind of like, Pete, what do you want to tell us about? And a head coach is going to limit, right, the information he offers. But the only two people he mentioned were Devin Witherspoon and Jamal Adams. He did not bring up, Ken Walker. He didn't say, and sometimes he uses those opportunities. Again, I make no promises that Ken Walker will play, right? We're waiting to see the severity. Right. But sometimes he tries to get ahead of it. I just know Pete Carroll, and uses opportunities to say, you know what, I'm so excited to see Zach Charbonnet this weekend. We're gonna look for him to really help us in this one. There wasn't a lot of that. So I'm reading through the tea leaves and hoping that means that Ken is gonna try to at least go up to game time. Again, we're gonna find out in probably an hour from now whether or not he's questionable.
Absolutely. Listen, Kenneth Walker, I watched that guy at Michigan State, phenomenal player, brings a lot to the table. And I think that if he's on the field, he forces you to worry about him. And that's where I think the Steelers defense can get tripped up, because they're going to have guys like Miles Jack, Michael Walker playing linebacker. And last week it was fine against Joe Mixon. I think they were able to mitigate that. But it's tough to do that week in and week out. And if you're going up against Kenneth Walker, he's another guy that you're going to have to know where he is in every single alignment that that the offense forces you to honor. On the defensive side of the ball, though, I'm very interested just to hear from you how they're going to deploy their linebackers specifically, because, of course, the big name that everyone in Pittsburgh is worried about is where's Devin Bush going to be? Because in his time in Pittsburgh, that he started off really well, got injured, and then whatever it was coming back from his ACL injury, he never got back to the level that he was playing. And at least from a statistical standpoint, I'm not studying tape on Devin Bush week in and week out, so I can't say how exactly he's doing. But from a statistical standpoint, it doesn't look like he has revitalized his career. Where do you see Devin Bush? Well, do you think he plays in this game a lot? And where have you seen him kind of beat? What have you seen him be for the Seahawks this year?
I do think we're going to see a lot of Devin Bush in this game. It sounds like Jordan Brooks is a little further behind in his recovery from an ankle issue. Again, in this interview, Pete Carroll, tight-lipped on injuries. All I can give you guys is the Jamal and Devin stuff, which is that they made it through the week and look pretty good. I'm not anticipating that Jordan Brooks will play. If he does, it'll be a pleasant surprise. Great for him. His miraculous comeback from an ACL injury is absolutely wild to me. So he is a tough guy. But even if he plays, they're going to want to take it easy. This is a former first-round pick for them. I think that they like working in Devin. And Devin's been an interesting one in Seattle. Obviously, when they got Devin Bush, I don't think at the time they had Bobby Wagner. The idea was, well, maybe they get back, a healthy Jordan Brooks, but God, they have big questions at linebacker. All of a sudden, you have Bobby Wagner and Jordan Brooks at linebacker. Like, wow, this is a nice group. They've been solid with tackles. Like, the count is high, but they've gotten beat over the middle with coverage. Like, you'll find if you watch Seahawks tape, some not busts, but just a bit of a slower version of Bobby Wagner in pass coverage over the middle. They can still both be really physical, though, and so can Devin. We saw him a little bit on special teams, just deliver a blow earlier this year. I don't know how much special teams he played in Pittsburgh. Probably not a ton as a former number 10
he did not
pick.
play
So
much.
I think he kind of liked the opportunity. So we talked to him this week. I'll end it with this. I'm getting wordy. We talked with him this week and asked him, hey, you're facing your former team. How do you feel about it? And he said he does like the opportunity. He didn't hold back. He said, I like the opportunity to play for my former team. I think it helps that I know how they do things and I know what they look like when they try to, run a certain way. He said that, the Steelers are really tough. He's expecting a really physical game. but he also tried to focus, and I think this was intentional, on like, I'm just happy that my time to prove myself gets to come when I have the most information possible. Like I get to be the
Mhm.
most useful player in a week when I might be starting. And he was really excited about that.
No, that is awesome, and I mean, it's such a huge game too. I mean, the Seahawks
Yeah.
right now, they have the 7th seed, so they're in the driver's seat to earn their way to the playoffs, and if he's a big part of getting this win, that's a big statement game, and that can keep you at a franchise for longer, because there were
Hmm.
people in Pittsburgh who were saying he was done in toast wherever he was going next. So,
Yeah.
good on him for fighting through adversity there. I wanted to also talk to you about this Seahawks run defense, because I think that's going to be a huge part of this. Everyone in Pittsburgh's talking about Mason Rudolph, but I look at the Seahawks run defense, and it ranks 27th in yards allowed, 25th in yards per attempt, and the Steelers offense has not clicked all but for one game, and that was just last week. And I think a lot of people are going to look at George Pickens, 195 yards, and say, "Oh, they just got to go to him again." I think people forget Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, that 1-2 punch with a balance of a little bit of
Yep.
play action. That's what the Steelers offense was always supposed to be. It wasn't supposed to be, throw it to the guy that you drafted last year, wide receiver, all the time. It was hit him here, hit him there, try to keep him guessing where you are, and hope that your offensive line with Broderick Jones, James Daniels, Isaac Seumalo, those guys lead you and kind of keep a balanced look here. I know the Seahawks added Leonard Williams, and that's a
Hmm.
big name to have on your
Hmm.
defensive line. What has the run defense struggled with, and how do you think they look like going into this game for the Seahawks?
I think they've been better about overall just the way that they are anticipating the run, with gap soundness and all of this stuff. And I say that from the linebackers I know, of current media analysts, former linebackers and defensive players who tell me these things. I'm like, what do you see? I've never played. What do you see as a linebacker when you watch the? So for them, I think they see sometimes a lack of discipline, but the primary issue for Seattle has just been sloppy play, bad tackling, and just
Mm,
overall slowness, right? Like looking like guys just aren't as athletic, which is such a bummer because this offseason was all about improving the run. I mean, it was something, and there's a story at training camp you ask every single day. For us, it was, when is Jamal going to be back? And also, how's the
mm,
run defense going? What are you guys focusing on? I mean, this was an area of focus in terms of bringing in new talent, in terms of a midseason acquisition to get, Leonard Williams. And he has been really helpful. He's had a really good 2 games, just kind of quietly, as interior defensive linemen are sometimes want to do. But yeah, it's just been maybe not the most stellar performance ever by a defensive line and subsequently linebackers. That on paper should be much better. And it's
mhm.
been so head scratching. I'm sure it's, how you guys feel about certain things with Pittsburgh's offense. Like you look at some of the
Mhm,
talent you have and you go, I don't get it. Jaron Reed, you had 10.5 sacks, with this team a couple years ago. And, God, Bobby Wagner, you're a Hall of Famer. And,
mhm.
Frank Clark, you should be so great. Daryl Taylor was almost a first round pick. I mean, all these guys in the mix. Losing Uchenna Nwosu was a huge part of this. I will say one thing. I agree with you in that that's absolutely how the Steelers should attack. If I was planning against the Seahawks, it's how I would play. I would target the middle of the field, intermediate passes, those kind of like 11-yard gains, 8-yard gains, and I would run the ball a lot because the one thing that they have been doing well is limiting explosive pass plays. They have been much better with that overall over the last couple games.
That just makes a lot of sense, is that if you're able
Yeah.
to run the ball, develop that way, and then if you can get maybe the Seahawks to bite on some play
Yep.
action, you can open up more opportunities for that. And like, make no mistake, like there's people in this town who think that Mason Rudolph, lit everything on fire. I think that the Steelers and anyone who's rationally looking at it is like, look, Rudolph played well, but he played that's a competent quarterback play, and that's all the Steelers have asked from anybody, including Kenny
Hmm.
Pickett, all season long. And the easier way to make it easier for those type of game managers, which is again not an insult, just a reality, that's what they're asking you to do. They're not asking you to go win the game by yourself, like sometimes Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen do, but they're just asking you to say, hey, go in there, make sure you make the smart decisions, let our playmakers determine the game, and let the defense do the hard part. If you keep us steady, you can be the captain of the ship and lead us to a victory. Now, one player that I also have my eyes on, and I'm not sure what his status is, but is Jamal Adams in this game, because he's
Mm-hmm.
a guy that can help the run and the middle of the field if he's healthy. But he hasn't played since they played the Niners. What'll be 3 weeks now?
Yep.
So I saw that he's been limited in practice on Wednesday and Thursday. is there a chance that he could be healthy for this game?
I do. I mean, he'll never be 100% this season. He said earlier in the season, I'm not going to be 100% this year. I'm surprised how long it's taken him to come back from this injury. Granted, the quad muscle quite literally tore from the bone. Like this is a very gruesome injury, not an easy one to come back from. You're going to lose a lot of explosiveness. And not only that, but you got to get over the mental hurdles of trying to have that burst. The way that it's been described by one of my colleagues, Dave Wyman, again, a former linebacker, and he's been watching Jamal a lot. He's explained it as like, it looks like sometimes Jamal just can't stop himself in quite the same way and turn in quite the same way. And so that's hurt him in coverage. Like against the Dallas Cowboys, there were some plays where he just looked a step slower. Like we saw Jamal when he first got here in that trade. You looked on the field and it was like, oh, that's a number 6 overall pick. Like that's what this looks like. Seattle, under Pete and John hadn't had that. And it's like, oh, this is what freaky athleticism is. I get it. And he has not been that version of himself. I do think he plays. I think that he plays, and I'm curious to see how he handles this. When you're a superstar, this is not easy. I think he plays in kind of a split role with Julian Love. I think Julian Love has earned the right to get more starting reps. I mean, he had a huge play against the Titans, 2 interceptions against the Eagles, including the one to seal the win. Like you don't deserve to lose that job just because Jamal came back. I do, though, still think that Jamal can help you, just that physicality. If he makes the right read and if he makes the right decision, I think he's still capable of really helping with the run. So I'm wondering if they, you start seeing like a 3 safety situation, against the run, maybe stacking the box a little bit. That's when I think we'll see Jamal a little bit more.
And Julian Love over 100 tackles this year. That when you're a safety making that many plays, you're being asked to do a lot. 100 tackles, 4 interceptions. He's been very good. So certainly it's not like they're weak at safety right now. But if you, like you said, if you can get that 3 safety look, you get Diggs, Love, and Adams all on the field at the same time, you could do a lot of dynamic things like that. The Steelers wanted to do things like that, and then they lost their entire safety room.
Right, and then everyone got hurt.
Right. It's one of those things. But let's get to some predictions here. We'll do that on the other side of this first break here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Is the Acrisure Fan Advantage with Chris Carter and Stacy Rost. But first, let's talk about our good friends at Savinas, Kane & Gallucci. They're mesothelioma and asbestos lawyers with over 85 years of experience. Call them now for a free consultation. That's Savinas, Kane & Gallucci. And we're also brought to you by GameTime.co, a website that you can go to right now to buy tickets for all your favorite events without making it any more stressful. GameTime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all your sports, music, comedy, theater events, anything near you. GameTime mostly has. You can also download the app right to your phone. Instead of, it's like me, I oftentimes wait until the last minute to buy tickets because I'm waiting for the best prices. And sometimes you can get those best prices at the last minute. But you go to the arena, you go to the stadium, whatever kind of event you're going to, and oftentimes you can go to the ticket booth and the prices are too high, or you go to a scalper and you're not sure if you're getting scammed. Well, Game Time helps you beat both of those opportunities, because Game Time, even up to an hour after your event has started, will show you not only the tickets that are available, but also show you the view from those tickets, so that you know that your seats are the right kind of seats that you're paying for. And they're so confident that they're going to give you the best prices for those tickets that they promise you, if you find for the same tickets, if you find tickets for the same event in the same section and row for less somewhere else, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference every time. Snag the tickets without stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code PITTPIT for $20 off your first purchase, or go to the website GameTime.co. Term tickets apply. Create an account and redeem code PITTPIT for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We're back here on the North Shore Drive podcast. It's the Acrisure Fan Advantage, to where we talk to an opponent expert. Our opponent expert is Stacy Rost of SeattleSports.com. Okay, Stacy, let's get down to the bottom line here. If there is an X factor to this game that you think leads to the biggest result, the biggest matchup, the biggest concern that you have, what is the biggest thing that you think plays into how this game shapes out 4:30 Eastern time Sunday?
So I'm going to say it's going to be between Pittsburgh's red zone defense and Seattle's rushing offense. Ultimately, they're passing offense, but they win when they run the ball. I would like to issue a quick correction. Of course, despite Pete Carroll's positivity this morning, it's a reminder I should never read into what a head coach says, because Jamal Adams has been ruled out in this game.
Oh, there you go.
Really interesting turn of events. There was a little bit of public pressure from Pete to be like, he had a great week, and then he's not playing. The good news is Ken Walker is questionable, not doubtful or out. So just a heads up for Steelers fans.
Okay.
So again, I am so impressed. We talk about everything that the fans of our teams and including us have sometimes complained about, and what's been frustrating this year. I'm so impressed and curious what you think about the Steelers' red zone defense, their scoring defense. It's just been something that it's so much better than Seattle. I mean, you look at where these teams differ, and being seventh in scoring compared to where Seattle is a pretty stark difference. Seattle's offense has struggled in the red zone. That's been much better over the last two games. Again, third down has been much better over the last two games, particularly in the fourth quarter. That's been the key there. But there's just been some questionable plays. I mean, there's been misses, sometimes some overthrows, sometimes not, going with certain players. Like I sometimes wonder, like, why not go to one of your tight ends? Why not have Zach Charbonnet, who's your, kind of more physical, overpowering running back, go here in this red zone play? So I'm curious to see how they handle what the Steelers are able to do there, because if that's going to be your strength as a team for Seattle, your offense, your passing offense, which it is, you have to prove it when it matters most. And they have not always been able to do that.
Well, to your point, the Seahawks right now, as going into this game, rank fifth in red zone scoring offense as far as touchdown percentage. The Steelers on offense rank sixth, right behind them. Fifth worst, excuse me, fifth worst. I apologize.
Yep.
But fifth worst. The Steelers are sixth worst. But on the flip side, the Steelers also have the fifth best red zone defense in the NFL. And that, I think that plays into this factor here. Certainly when you look at these two teams. Meanwhile, the Seattle Seahawks also on defense ranked sixth as well, ranked sixth worst in red zone defense. That could be a major factor here. The Steelers saw a lot of red zone success last week. Well, a little bit when it got into the red zone, they were able to make it. They were able to make it work. They scored a lot of long touchdowns. The prior week. But I think a part of what makes the Steelers really good in the red zone is that what they invested in this year was they wanted to get a lot of veteran presences to lead this defense. Now, granted, a lot of those guys have gotten hurt, like Minka Fitzpatrick's not going to play in this game. Landon Roberts out for this game. Cole Holcomb, Quan Alexander, they've been out for the year. But when they move Patrick Peterson to safety, one thing that you could see on every play, especially in this last Bengals game, when you saw it, you could see him coordinating, pointing things out, helping Joey Porter Jr. Hey, go look out for this, look out for that. And even when it didn't happen, the Steelers were at least prepared for those different lineups. And that is something that has really boosted them this year. Even Miles Jack, who was on the team just last year, retired. Everyone thought he was done. The guy was like taking like flight lessons and things like that. And the Steelers like, hey, we need some help. He comes back in, and as soon as he was put into the lineup this past game against the Bengals, I was using my binoculars from the press box, and I could see him calling out certain run plays like, hey, they're going this way, they're going that way, adjust. And the team was responding. And I think that plays a big factor into it, is that when you have that kind of coordination, you're not giving teams just easy looks like, oh, the slant's there, we're going to get a touchdown on this play, and you're forcing them to hold on to the ball. And then that allows guys like TJ Watt, guys like Alex Highsmith, Cam Hayward, if they're getting pressure, then the quarterback, they only have a couple seconds to make a decision, and that leads to more success there. And I think that's where the Steelers are at here, and that's where I want to ask you, the Seahawks offensive line, how do you think that they can hold up if you're telling them, hey, like, you need to hold up for at least 4 to 5 seconds here to at least keep Geno clean in the pocket without having to maneuver and create more space? Because the bottom line is, if the Steelers pass rushers, their edge rushers specifically, take over a game, that's when they're at their best.
I think that it's been up and down, and part of that is because I think that the ceiling for your two tackles is so high. And they're so young. So sometimes you're going to have games where pass pro looks phenomenal, and you're like, wow, he actually, this crew held off Aaron Donald. That's so impressive. And then you're going to have games where Geno has no time whatsoever to throw the ball. I think that how Seattle has tried to combat that is highlighted especially by their performance against Dallas. They just said, let's get rid of it sooner. Like, let's just forget, let's forget buying time all the time and just try to get the defense on its heels as well. And it was their best offensive performance. It was one of the best offensive performances of the year. We haven't seen that from Geno against the Titans. It's not as easy to repeat that kind of performance, and I get that. But yeah, I think, it sounds like such a cop-out. I just don't count on them to do it consistently. So when I look at TJ Watt's 17 sacks, I go, uh-oh. Like, I don't look at Seattle's offense and go, man, they're going to eat. Like, this is great. I think, like, oh God, I really hope Cowboys version of Geno Smith shows up, and Shane Waldron and him can work together and just find ways to be like, all right, how can we scheme and plan as though we don't have an advantage here? Because we won't.
Mhm. I think one of the things that the teams that have hurt the Steelers with their offense the most have done, they've used draws, screen passes, and quick tight end passing plays to
Mm,
try to find ways to make it so we're going to make it so the edges don't matter. Like the Niners did it,
right.
for to build their lead in week 1. The Texans might have been the best team to do that with CJ Stroud. They found ways to say, hey, those guys, sure, they're going to win those matchups. We're just going to make it so it doesn't matter that they're winning their matchups by calling plays that say, hey, you're not the person that has to make the play. The middle linebacker has to make the play, or the defensive tackle has to make the play. Those are the people that the safeties have to come up and be in the right spots. That's where if I'm the Seahawks, I'm trying to force the Steelers defense to prove itself, because the Bengals tried that last week. The Steelers were just ready for it. And that was even with backup guys like Eric Rowe, another guy that came off the couch starting at safety for them. He got an interception in the game. Guys like Michael Walker, a practice squad guy, Miles Jack, like we talked about. Those guys, if I'm the Seahawks, I'm pressing those guys. It's like, look, you may have proved it last week against the Bengals offense, but you got to prove that again on the road now. And it's a loud environment. You're going to have to communicate a lot faster, and it's going to be a lot different. That's where if I'm the Seahawks, I'm pressing them the most so that I try to help my matchup problems with Watt and Highsmith on the edges as much as possible. With that being said, Stacy, give us your X factors to this game? What's the biggest difference maker? And then your final score prediction for how this plays out.
All right. I really, really, really hope he's questionable right now that Ken Walker plays, because I think that him and the run game are the X factor for Seattle. They find so much more success. I think their record is like 1-7 when they don't reach 100 rushing yards. Like when they don't run, they don't find success. Lo and behold, it's like a basic rule of football, right? So I think he's the X factor for me in this game. I don't know how easy that will become against the Steelers, but it has to be a way that Seattle finds a way to attack. Am I making my pick as well?
Yes, make your pick.
Okay. I think it's going to be a very close game.
Same.
Again, both of these teams very similar. I am going to go with Seattle. I'm just going to take the home field advantage, and I'm going to also take the benefit of them getting back who I think is their best defensive player, also questionable, assuming he plays, Devin Witherspoon. He is a playmaker. I mean, this is a guy that can rattle a young quarterback. He's gonna get, if he gets another sack, he's gonna have 4 for the season. He's had a pick 6. He's had some good plays. If he's out there, I think that defensively, that's a guy who can make a difference.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense to me. Also, I just quick check here, and this is me operating pretty fast. I believe the Seahawks are 6-0 when they run the ball for at least 100 yards this year.
Oh yeah, that sounds right.
To your point.
It's an uncanny difference where you're like, oh wow, this is incredibly obvious now what they need to do.
I mean, heck, after you look at how they had a 4-game losing streak, and then all of a sudden that stops with them beating the Eagles, and they got that 100-yard mark. They didn't need 100 yards to beat the Titans, but I don't think too many people need 100 yards to beat the Titans this year, unfortunately for them. But in all seriousness, I think that's where this game comes down to. I predicted with Brian on our Friday show. I said Steelers 26-19. I think a lot of red zone possessions, happen in this game, and it's going to come down to who hits a few more. I just think the Steelers hit on a couple more, but I don't begrudge the Seahawks. I don't begrudge the Seahawks at all as being a team that can't win this game. Like, this isn't a game. I think this is going to come down to a coin flip. Who wins more in the red zone? Who commits more turnovers? And which side runs the ball better first? If the Steelers get Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren going, and it slows down, it allows them to have longer possessions, I think the Seahawks get in trouble. But on the flip side, if the Seahawks find a way to get Kenneth Walker going, and that prevents Watt and Highsmith from pinning their ears back and getting to be the pass rushers that they are, that could allow the Seahawks to neutralize that and play to their strengths. That is where I think the crux of this matchup is, and I think both of us seeing this as a really awesome Sunday afternoon fight that's going to be between two playoff teams.
I think it's going to be so fun, so physical. I'm genuinely excited, not just to cover it, but to watch it as a football fan. I think it'll be great.
Absolutely. Stacy, thank you so much for joining us here in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette's North Shore Drive podcast and the Acrisure Fan Advantage. Let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
So you can find more of my work at seattlesports.com. You can listen to, if anyone wants to preview a podcast to get ready for this game, it's the Bump and Stacy Show, available wherever you get your podcasts. And then you can find me at Stacy Rost on x.com.
Absolutely do that. She's amazing. Thank you, Stacy, for joining us here. I'm Chris Carter of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. You can find me every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and sometimes Saturday here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Read all my work covering the University of Pittsburgh's athletic department, as well as all our Steelers talk at post-gazette.com. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you in 2024. That's most likely when this show will be back here. But also we'll have our team, Jerry, Ray, Ron, all of our guys are be in Seattle covering that game. Get all their live coverage at post-gazette.com. We'll see you here after the game talking about what happened to the Steelers and what their chances are at the playoffs. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.